Welcome back to another exciting episode on the show, Control or Be Controlled, a podcast designed to help you start thinking differently and take control of your life. And I remain your host, Darlington. Today's guest is Judy Richardson-Mahre. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist, ADHD coach, parent coach, and speaker who has spent more than 14 years helping neurodiverse individuals, couples, and families move from shame and confusion to confidence and joy. Judy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, Judy, so I have some questions here for you, and I would like us to get into them.
Okay.
Okay, so let's start with the basic first of all, talking about ADHD. I know you are an ADHD coach. So tell us, what is ADHD and what do people often misunderstand about it?
Yeah, so ADHD is a neurobiological issue with how the brain is wired, and it often affects people in ways that impact their executive functions, their ability to self-manage or self-control, to manage their time management, their materials, but also their memory, how they respond in different situations, how they manage stress and emotions. And it's really a brain wiring struggle. And I think that's the biggest misunderstanding is often people think that it's a behavior problem or something like that. And so we're often belittling or punishing kiddos that have ADHD or judging people that have ADHD instead of understanding that it's how their brain is wired. It's not a choice or how they are choosing to act. So often people, every part of our brain is responsible for a different function, and the brain wiring and the brain communication in those areas of the brain, how efficient that brain wiring is at transmitting signals, determines how efficient that part of the brain is. So it really is a brain wiring struggle.
Okay, thank you so much, Judy. So, moving on, how is parenting a child with ADHD different from parenting a neurotypical child?
Yeah, so when you're parenting a child that has ADHD, you have to understand this brain wiring struggle, and you have to understand how and which areas of the brain it really is impacting for that specific child. They often talk about ADHD as a developmental delay. The brain is developing according to normal processes, but it's often delayed up to a third of a person's chronological age. And so you have to understand, where is your child developmentally? Are they 1 year behind? Are they 3 years behind? Are they more? And how are they impacted? And then what of the executive functions, the parts of the brain that are impacted by ADHD, what parts of those of the brain are impacted for your child or for the child that you're caregiving for? And how do you respond differently? Because it's not behavior. Traditional behavior techniques talk about punishing unwanted behavior and rewarding or incenting wanted behavior. And unfortunately, for kiddos that have ADHD, they don't have control over all of those behaviors. And so punishing or rewarding often doesn't work because those consequences or implementing those consequences assumes that a child has control over their behavior. And unfortunately, with ADHD, they don't. And so you really have to take a much more structured approach. You have to make sure that there's structure and external structure that helps it reinforce the rules or the things that you want to reinforce as a parent. And then you have to take, instead of these consequences and punishment, you really have to take much more of a teaching and understanding approach to help the child learn skills and tools and tricks that help the areas of their brain that are struggling. Now, for things that are not based in executive functions, then you can use traditional parenting approaches. For things that may be executive functions or may be impacted by ADHD, you really have to take a much more structured and educational approach.
All right, thank you so much, Judy. So, moving on, there are a lot of misconceptions about ADHD. What are some of the biggest myths you'd like to clear up?
The misconceptions, yeah. Well, the misconceptions, I think we have kind of boiled ADHD down to, kind of impulsive reactions and the inability to focus, as well as being hyper, right? The hyperactivity seems to be kind of a hallmark symptom. And so we boiled it down to those kind of simple things. And it's almost become kind of a meme, right? Where if I forget something or I do something, I'm hyper or high energy, then I must have ADHD. And, or I forgot something in another room and that's ADHD. The reality is it's so much more complex than those simple symptoms. And so, I think it's really important that we understand this, and we also understand that it is a neurological issue. It's not someone's behavior, and we're not just these people just aren't acting irresponsibly. They have a real struggle with how their brain is wired and how efficiently their brain is communicating, which impacts different functions. Now, all of us are on a spectrum from a neurological perspective, including those that have ADHD. And so understanding that all of those differences, we all have different brain wiring, we all have strengths and struggles. And so how do we start to understand that everybody's brain is different and seek to understand with curiosity and compassion instead of judgment and disapproval?
All right, Judy, thank you so much. So, away from the misconceptions, uh, it seems like many more people are being diagnosed with ADHD. I myself, I used to think I have ADHD. I am not sure, but I have not been diagnosed. So, it seems that there are more people today than before. What has changed?
I think that the statistics still show that there's around 10% of our population that has ADHD. I think that there has been an uptick in diagnoses because I think there's lots of reasons. I think many parents struggle with setting boundaries and setting rules for their children and making sure that they're following those rules and that parents are responding with firmness and kindness. And so many kids are being diagnosed that don't necessarily fully meet the criteria. I think we have a general issue with attention in our society because of social media. We have a very high expectation of immediate gratification, and it's very difficult to separate this immediate gratification or this need, this inability to wait for other things. Sometimes that can be misconstrued as ADHD. I think that there's a lot of trauma that can be misconstrued as ADHD because some of the symptoms are very similar. So I think that, and I think just there's high amounts of focus on ADHD, much more, focus from a news or media perspective. And so people are self-diagnosing more and thinking that some of the struggles that they have will be solved by medication or something like that. So I think there's lots of reasons that it's been a little bit overdiagnosed for sure.
Right. Thank you so much, Judy. What then should parents do when a child with ADHD is completely overwhelmed or out of control?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things. If there's a child that is completely out of control, the first thing is to remove that child to someplace that they is less stimulating. Oftentimes, kids are out of control when they are overstimulated or they don't know how to handle a situation. Kids that have ADHD often handle stress in an extreme. All of their emotions are extreme. And so you have to remove them first and then try and help them calm down. I separate calming down from problem solving. I don't ever problem solve with a child unless they are calm and I am calm. So working with the child to figure out how do you calm yourself down? How do you calm your body down so that you can get your thinking brain back online? I am a big proponent of setting expectations ahead of time. Like if you're going out to a store or something like that, I'm a big proponent of setting up rules and structure at home that we can fall back on when we're facing a situation where the child is out of control. And then, it's hard to discern kind of, is this a problem with an executive function or a problem with ADHD, or is this due to something else where the child may have, done something, made a choice that is not optimal. And so, but really the first thing, if they're out of control, separate them from or remove them from the situation and help them calm down. And don't do anything else until those two things are done.
Thank you so much, Judy. That was a very, very wonderful answer. So ADHD doesn't just affect children; it can impact marriages as well. Because the adults who I don't know how to, I would say, okay, you are in better position to explain something. It can impact marriages and entire families. What are some common challenges in relationship that you see ADHD bringing?
Yeah, gosh. ADHD in relationships. I've been married to a man with ADHD for almost 34 years. And so it brings a lot of interesting challenges. For individuals that have ADHD, oftentimes it's difficult to remember things, like remember agreements. Like if we agree on how to handle something with our children or with each other, it is often very difficult for my partner that has ADHD to remember those agreements. And so we have to kind of make sure that everything's documented or there's ways for him to remember. So we have signs. We have signs up all over the place. He uses Post-it notes to help him remember those agreements. Oftentimes, people that have ADHD have a hard time finishing projects. So they'll start something and then they won't finish it. That's true of new hobbies, right? They'll get really into a new hobby. They'll get all the equipment and they'll be lost in that hobby for a long time. And then they'll just discard it or that will go by the wayside and they'll find something new or novel to focus on. Many people that have ADHD have passions and things that they're really into. And they have that ability to hyper focus. And so that is something that they're often, sometimes they disappear and get hyper focused on things that they're interested in and things that are important or things that the partner thinks are important don't get done. And so that's often a struggle in relationships. There's just so many individuals in relationship with a partner that has ADHD. They kind of fall into more parent-child roles, which is frustrating for the partner that doesn't have ADHD and that is in the parent role. And it's frustrating for the partner that does have ADHD and falls into the child role. And it's demeaning for, that person with ADHD to fall into the child role. And frustrating on the other end because they feel as though they can't rely on the partner that has ADHD, especially if the ADHD is not treated. So there's lots of struggles in communication, in responsibility, and who's responsible for what, in determining what roles each other is playing, and then. Again, oftentimes individuals with ADHD struggle with emotional regulation. And so having discussions and communication where there's conflict is often very challenging. That's probably a good highlight of some of the struggles.
Thank you so much. It's very good to hear. I think you for someone who was married to an ADHD for 34 years, you are in the best position to speak about this. I'm so happy the way you broke down that question. Thank you so much, Judy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Yeah, we found ways to deal with it, but and we both have really worked very hard to find what works. And we will not, that's the other area where you have to calm down before you problem solve. You can't try and problem solve or get to a resolution until you're both calmed down. And that's often very difficult. We stop conversations or conflicts and wait until we're both calm to come back and revisit them. That's hard. It's really hard.
definitely. So, as both a therapist and a parent of 4 neurodiverse children, can you tell us one lesson you have learned that completely changed the way you go about parenting?
Say that again. An example of how it's completely changed how I've
As both,
approached parenting.
yeah, one lesson you have learned that completely changed the way you approach parenting.
Yeah. So, um, when I started parenting, um, I think we're all a product of how we were parented, right? And so I think it's important to look at how your parents parented you and what kind of beliefs or understanding of parenting do you have, and then what are you bringing to your parenting? Because I think, I had wonderful parents, but they were very strict and expected a lot, and it was very, I hate to say fear-based, but it was fear-based, in that they were in charge. They didn't, we were, limited in our ability to question their authority, etc. So I started parenting my kids that way. And my family even gave me feedback and said, "You're not hard enough on your kids. You don't have enough, you're not strict enough." And what I learned is my kids just weren't the kind of kids, and all of my children have ADHD. They're not the kind of kids that respond well to that kind of parenting. So I really had to look at, the authoritative version of parenting and come up with a different alternative. If I tried to pin them down and get more control, they would just escalate. And if I escalated further or with them, then they would they would escalate further, and there was no stopping that, right? And so I had to be much more clear on the boundaries and the rules, and then firm, but also kind. I had to show them respect if I wanted respect back. And I had to, and not that authoritative, my parents were very respectful, but it's a little bit different if they're in authoritative position versus much more of a mutually respectful kind and firm. Now, I've seen parents try and go to a more permissive or gentle parenting, and they've mistaken it for permissive, and it doesn't work, especially for kids that have ADHD or neurodiverse brains. These kids really need those boundaries, that structure, but they need it delivered in a kind and respectful and firm way, so that they have some agency or ability to ask questions and challenge a bit, right? So that was the hardest thing for me, is rethinking my parenting, my whole parenting style.
Thank you, Judy. So I hope people can learn from that. So here is my final question for you. If there's one
Yep.
message you wish, here's my final question for you.
Okay.
If there's one message you wish every parent of a child with ADHD could hear today, what would it be?
Oh gosh, that's tough, Darlington. I have so many messages. One message is you you have to, there's hope. I think that's the biggest message. There is hope. And you have to follow your children and determine what they need, and then help them build skills and coping mechanisms and tools and tricks to handle the things that are struggles. But also, you have to help them find their superpowers. because there are superpowers in every child, and they may not find the way that is, they might not go the way that everybody expects, but there is no one recipe to success. You have to help them find the recipe that works for them. And it may be different for every child, but understanding that they have specific superpowers and gifts and talents that are unique to them, help them figure out how to manage the struggles, and then exploit the strengths. So there is hope. There's ways to deal with ADHD that is positive and effective.
All right, Judy, thank you so much. This has been a very exciting episode. Thank you for sharing your professional expertise and your personal experience. You have reminded us that ADHD isn't about laziness, bad parenting, or a lack of discipline. It's about understanding how different brains work and learning how to support them with compassion and effective strategies. So, for those that would like to learn more about your work, your coaching, your therapy, and your resources for neurodiverse families, how can they do that?
Yeah, so you can find me at www.kcccares.com. KCCCARES.com.
All right, Judy, thank you so much, and do have a wonderful day ahead.
Thanks so much, Darlington. Take care.